Cloaked in the shadows.
Okay, Amanda.
Okay, this is Cloaked in the Shadows.
The people who don't know, what is Cloaked in the Shadows?
It's usually the weird and wonderful podcast that sort of focuses on paranormal, but it's mostly as well, it's just like interesting conversations and anything that interests us because it's our podcast and we can do what we want.
One way. That rules our podcast now. Of course, I'm Andy and this is Amanda Nicholson. With us today, we have a special guest today. And we've got the fantastic Jack Bowman with us today. Now, people will know, obviously, we're Close in the Shadows. We keep this podcast short. This is going to go over 2 or 3 episodes because I know already what I want to talk to Jack about, and there's plenty. So, right, Jack, what we'll have to do, certainly the part 1, would be the introduction to people. And so, tell us a bit about yourself first of all.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. So, yes, as you said, I am Jack Bowman. My passport will confirm that. And I am a scripted audio, drama, audio fiction writer, director, producer, executive producer of various forms of audio drama or scripted podcast content. And I sort of veer between multiple genres, but a lot of the time I end up always getting gravitated back to horror.
Yeah, now that's people are wondering, that's the clue today. Horror, mostly, right? Because, well, certainly part 2, we're going to go on to something quite specific. But yeah, now also, where did it all come from originally for you, Jack? Because I know you've been involved in this for quite a while, haven't you, as well?
I am actually an OG podcaster right from the very beginning. So what happened was back in this is 2005, 2006. My day job was actually working as an actor in the London Dungeon. I graduated as an actor. And there were a lot of us getting very frustrated because that was the day job and we weren't getting much acting experience outside of it, career-wise. So I wrote my own play to put on in a little theatre, the Etc. Theatre in Camden, London, which went on for 3 weeks. And around about the same time, another member of the company, Mariel Roneka Temple, she was a massive radio fan and she came and saw the play. She really loved it. She said, I just want to share an idea with you. What if we turned your theatre play into an audio play and we just put it on the internet for people to download as an MP3? And I went, yeah, okay. And long story short, that was a big success. She put 2 plays up. That was the birth of us starting our journey into the world of audio creation. And we beat the iPod by 6 months. So the iPod comes along and boom, everything suddenly makes sense.
Oh, no, it's genius with the iPod. Like, I've been involved in podcasting since 16, so I've done 8 years of it. Although, I was talking about the year before, and you came on board with me the year after, didn't you?
Yeah.
Yeah, because we originally did a podcast called Reading in Bed, which is a book review podcast. And then that ran its course last year, and we're doing this podcast now. So, yeah, but, brilliant. Now, yeah, it's interesting because when you're looking at what you've done as a creative person, as well, you've done, like I said, it was like you've done an awful lot of really interesting in-house production as well. For example, on Lost Theatre, when I'm going to ask you, because we hinted at this before off mic about Let the Right One In. You did an adaptation of it between 2014, 2016. Now, people wonder what that is. One of my mind, the greatest horror films ever done. I think it's one of the most beautifully shot, but also disturbing as well. And young lady here, we're not sure whether you've actually seen the original one, but you've definitely seen the remake, haven't you?
Yeah.
And Amanda's seen the remake of Let Me In. So, but I want to learn about this first of all, and you hinted at me before. This is a play that's very different to when you usually write, isn't it?
Yeah, so I was the associate director of Lost Theatre for 2.5 years, which meant I was effectively the in-house director for their own production. So we started to have a really good run. We got in-house production up and running once I came on board. So the first thing we did was a self-pen piece called Night of the Hellhound Live, which was a Ghostwatch style horror theatre piece where you couldn't tell what was real and what wasn't. And that was a lot of fun. And that kick-started us getting back into producing shows in-house. And it led to a few other things, like us doing a National Theatre Connections play, a young company. And then we went and did Jerusalem, which is obviously, we were the first London revival of that. And that is a massively iconic and legendary play. And a lot of these projects were coming with past history and baggage, if you know what I mean. Because you do Jerusalem, you've got to cast a rooster, but Mark Rylance has his shadow of owning the role across it. So I always take this approach where it's like, okay, what you have to do, right? Mark Rylance is Jerusalem. Throw it all out. What inspired Jez Butterworth to write the play? Go back to source. So, what he was basing the character of Rooster on was someone he knew down in Devon, I think. So we researched the biography and the history of that person to put back into the play. So we bypassed what previously existed. Yeah. So I'd always say to my company, when we get a play like Let the Right One In, okay, you ignore, if you've seen the film version, ignore it. If you saw it at the roll call, ignore it. Bam. We treat the text, the script, as sacred moving forward, right? This is our blueprint. And for some reason, this is the only time it never worked, and it took me a long time to work out why. Because what has happened with Let the Right One In is that successive versions have sort of cannibalized from the previous versions. So when you get to that stage play version, brilliantly done by Jack Thorne, he's sort of taken material from what he likes in the American version and the Scandinavian version and sort of mashed it all up together. And that does create some inconsistencies which we couldn't get past. So I remember, like, we were a month into rehearsals, halfway through, and I went, nothing is working. I went away, sat down, thought about it, checked over all the material again, and it's the only time I've had to say to my cast, right, your homework is, you go read the book, you go reread this script, you go watch the Swedish version, you go watch the American version, because without those pieces in the past, the previous work, you can't actually get the context of the stage play. So it was the first play that came very close to defeating me, and I had to break my own rules on that one. So, and then it worked, and it was great, and everything turned out beautiful and lovely, and the audience loved it. But yeah, my God, first month it was just like, am I failing as a director? Have I lost all my superpowers now? But yeah, it's a fascinating example of how at times creatively you have to break your own rules and rethink what you think you know.
Yeah, I'm going to ask Amanda a question here, because you won't necessarily know this, Jack. Amanda was a horror writer. What do you think to what Jack said there about breaking your own rules?
Yeah, I think sometimes, as long as you understand why you're doing it.
Yeah, and that's why, because that's the good point behind it. So, yeah, and by the end of that, Jack, you probably felt yourself, didn't you? Like, you knew why you're breaking your own rules on it, and the question would have been like afterwards, do you want to do that again in the future?
Well, I think all it then becomes is you're always as a creative on a path of growth. So it becomes a moment where you learn, oh, okay, you've had a very good tool that seems to have been one size fits all, and suddenly that tool doesn't work. And what you do is you adapt and you learn, and you have a second tool. So at times it's like, okay, well, I won't beat myself up in future. If something isn't working in that way, then it means, not everything creatively can follow the same rules. So it just expands your experience and your mindset and leaves you in a place where it's like, okay, next time I have this issue, is it this problem? Okay, so let me try that solution.
Yeah. I agree. I think it's good when writing, you can learn to be versatile and work out move on from things all the time. Now, I'm going to have to ask you next as well. You said already, one of the things you always keep going back to is horror. So, and we can use this to link into part 2, I guess, but we won't say why yet. We'll keep people guessing. But
sure.
What was your earliest love into horror then?
Oh, I think, yeah. So when I was a little kid, my mum would just record things late at night she wanted to watch. She was actually the genre person in my house, and she would tape things like the old sort of 60s and 70s Hammer horror, the Amicus movies, which would get repeated on Channel 4 like 11 o'clock at night. So she'd take them, she'll come down, summer holidays, she's doing the ironing or whatever around the house, I'm a kid, and you've got these really gaudy OTT 60s British horror movies running in the background.
It's debates whether somebody's a dated nowadays.
But then the weird thing was, because she was also massively into sci-fi, which this will tie into part 2 as well. So she got, she watched the first episode of Doctor Who. So when I was little, I watched Doctor Who. That's important for part 2. But the, you know, the thing was, she was introducing more sci-fi around the house and letting me watch more. It was fascinating that, there was often that little kind of culty classic sci-fi horror crossover, where sci-fi films actually lean into horror. So things like Alien would be there, Predator. I wasn't allowed to watch Predator for a long time because of naughty words, apparently. And but the one that always stuck with me as a kid was the George Powell War of the Worlds.
Oh,
Because and again, this might be why I ended up where I ended up, but its sound design is a terrifying thing. The model work is beautiful; it looks great, but that
yeah. I think the key point is horror for me is not listening to fun. And I want your opinion on this, because this one's a horror queen. She's got a reputation of being a horror queen. I think it's the sound, the music often carries it as much of me, as you said already, than actual gore.
Yeah.
I was hoping a detailed answer of it.
I'm trying to remember the film that we went to see where it was completely quiet, and then it was like when the monsters. Yeah, that was it. And when the monsters came, that sort of like shook you, because then there was a noise, and they sort of shook you out of the silence.
And the thing is, as well, like, sound is the first sense you develop when you're growing in the womb, and it's the last sense that switches off at the end of your life. So therefore, it's the sense your body trusts the most. And one of the most fun things about doing horror in audio is there are tried and tested and proven techniques, and they might actually sound like cliches, but there's a specific reason, for example, why heartbeats get used in a film soundtrack. Because that is a very low-level form of neuro-linguistic programming. So the more you can make someone aware of their own body while they're intaking information, the more suggestible someone becomes. So playing around with sound, that's why you get the heartbeat, the breathing, and stuff like that, because it's designed to make the audience associate themselves with their own breath and their own heartbeat and their own pulse, and then boom, they can lay on the scares really heavily and really thick.
You do. Do you think really it is a very, very different medium what you're playing with there? Because I first started really playing podcasts about 6-7 years ago, and I do remember they were a couple of really good zombie ones. I forgot the name now as well. What they do?
Was it We're Alive by Casey Wayne?
Yes, it was.
Yes. Oh, lovely Casey. He's just done Buffy on audio.
Have you?
Yeah.
You better. People better wonder, Amanda is a big Buffy fan. Is that confirmed?
Yeah.
Are we all? Casey Wayland's gone from We're Alive to doing Buffyverse for Audible, which they announced about 2 weeks ago. So
I think Amanda might be subscribing to Audible after this quite quickly. Yeah. No, but We're Alive is such a good series. That's why I want to get you on there. Well, I'm not saying why yet, so we'll let people guess what We're Alive is really, because it's creative. You've got a lot less part to do, obviously no pictures, but the sound of it really carried me on what the 4 years did of it. Unbelievable stuff it was.
So, Casey, I think, is an absolute genius in how he uses sounds. We don't necessarily agree on how we approach it in production or scripting. He's got his ideas, and I think 98% of them make sense, and I've got mine, and, we're aligned apart from 2%. But, it was a great show. It was in those very early days when people were putting out that kind of horror content. At the same time, we had the Spring Hill saga. Yeah. And, doing high quality horror audio back then was exceptionally rare to find in the podcasting sphere. So it's natural that people like, Casey have risen to the top, because, his work was absolutely fantastic. And I heard that and said, that is someone I've got to get to know. And I'll tell you a true story. If we've got time.
Yeah, go for it.
So in 2012, we won the Silver Mark Time Horror Ogle Award in the US for the Spring Hill Saga, which was second place. And then 2 years, we got that in 2012. So this was a 2011 award. And then I called up with Casey 2 years ago, went to see his studio, talking around, and on the wall was the Gold Award for the 2011 Horror Award. And I went, oh, I got one nearly almost very nearly like that. So he had actually won the gold and I'd won the silver the same year. So,
Wow.
yeah.
Wow. Now, obviously, we should clearly explain to people, obviously, in this. What made you want to move into more the audio side now? Because I know, obviously, you don't do as much theatre now, certainly now, what I believe,
No.
anyway, certainly.
Yeah, good question. Theatre, a lot of long, exhausting hours. We used to joke about this, but a lot of the time coming home 2 o'clock in the morning. And there was this just weird thing where I was starting to wonder about cutting back from theatre. So I'd been a bit hybrid. I mean, theatre was sort of like 70% of my time and audio 30 under the background. And then I was sort of thinking, should I cut theatre back a little? You know what I mean? The hours are long. I was trying to start a family at the time. And then, lo and behold, suddenly within about 18 months, somehow the ratio virtually flipped to being 90% audio. So within a year, I was in, a studio manager, producer for Audible, running things like Murder on the Orient Express, Darkwater Bride, The Soul Breaker. And from there, it kind of just took off, really. Somehow it just became the main breadwinner. So maybe I just put the question out and the universe answered. And if that's the case, I'm very grateful. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's a good way of putting it. Amanda, what do you think then about natural progression and creativity?
Yeah, I think if you try to do the same thing, things change around you. It stops working.
Yeah, it's like it was certainly like it's. You wouldn't necessarily know with Jack before we chat today. Both me and Amanda are writers in different ways. It's like I started off as a poet for a long time, and last couple I've gone into all kinds of different directions. And when I met Amanda originally, you've got to tell Jack what you bought for me as a first date present.
Well, I bought a copy of my own book, Being a Narcissist.
Which was about zombies. So it's like we've both got different ways.
Nice to meet you. I have a copy of my book.
Fair enough.
That's why.
Breaks the ice, doesn't it? Yeah.
It does, and certainly.
I'm a published author. Here you go. Right.
Brilliant. Well, I said it's whilst we've got together as a couple, really. It's like we're both writers in different ways, and we've changed over time. I mean, as what today you got. I know you've got a quite young family now, and like your priorities change naturally over time, don't they? So that's what
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things you just have to adjust. I mean, like if anyone ever says, "Oh, I'm going to wait for the right time to have a family," there's never a right time, because if your life is right, do you know what kids do? They make it not right. But we adjust. I mean, I've just done 10 months at Moonbug, which was a very tough, hard project. We had to produce 2 seasons based on 2 of their brands, so that's 4 podcast seasons in 6 months. We had to turn around a lot of long hours and stuff like that. But if the understanding and the teamwork is there, you find ways to get it done. And now it's my turn because I've got a slightly relaxed schedule to be a more hands-on dad. Let the other half do what she needs to do. So, but yeah, I mean, it is quite a challenge, but hopefully I don't think it slowed me down in any way. It just means it's slightly more complicated to organise, where more human beings need to be than just your cast. So
yeah. Well, obviously, before we go on to part 2, so I'm looking at the time. Always conscious of time cloaked in the shadows.
Yeah.
But tell us about then how you actually normally do your audio, the actual recording setup for this. So obviously, good thing nowadays you can do a lot of it at home, can't you? So
you can.
That's why. So.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on a project-by-project basis. Yes, you can get. So, for example, in Circles, which was a horror podcast I did in 2020, written by the brilliant Brendan Connolly. For that one, we were in the middle of lockdown, but what I did was actually replicate a live studio setup via Zoom. So every actor was fed in to Zoom, and then every actor used their home studio to record the material. So they could bounce themselves off each other like they were in a studio environment. Then it hasn't come out yet. We're just waiting for the go-ahead on when that's going to happen. I did a piece called Unsinkable, also during lockdown, which is a big military war thriller based on a true story of the San Demetrio. And every actor for that one was actually recorded in isolation. apart from we had that brief little middly lift of lockdown meant we could get 3 actors into a studio COVID safe together. But every actor recorded in isolation, they had to be directed, different intentions, and then everything had to be stitched together. And I did that. I also did that approach for Long Night in Egypt, which is a horror piece I did last Halloween for Violet Hour Media, which is a fantastic piece by Sarah Petard. But when it came to the thing we were going to discuss in part 2, it was very much, no, I want a studio, I want a company. We get actors in, we recorded over 2 days, and I just wanted to get back to that feeling of having some human interaction, which I hadn't had since, gosh, maybe when we finished Expeditionary Force in Maine, when I went over there to be a guest for that recording. And it was just a joy, because we can talk about this more in part 2 if I'm going too far. But
people are wondering why we're conscious of the time, because I've noticed we've just got just 20 minutes now. So
sure.
I think,
all right.
Is there anything you want to ask for in wrap up part 1?
Oh, I just found the whole thing really interesting.
Yeah, I thought it was. So what we're going to do, guys and girls, we'll wrap up part 1 now. We've just got over 20 minutes, and we're going to come back with part 2, which will be next week. But we're going to record it in about 2 minutes, so just to confuse you. See you all next time, guys.
Cloaked in the shadows.